Welcome to Pivot Points, a new series featuring some of the world's most successful women, candidly sharing their stories and insights about how they made it to the top and how you can too. Hosted by Perry Yateman, a straight-talking global executive and award-winning author who created the career and life of her dreams and now wants to help other ambitious women do the same.
Welcome. This is Perry Yateman, host of Pivot Points. You may not know my next guest by name, but I bet you know the products her family company makes, and they've been making them for more than half a century. It started with the launch of Clearasil, teaming up with Dick Clark, for those of us who are old enough to know who that is, in a new form of media, get this kids, television, to start American Bandstand. But today, they are a global company with brands including Vagisil, Just for Men, and Seabond. And that makes them category leaders in feminine care, men's hair color and grooming, and denture care. But she's not just another CPG powerhouse executive, and we've been lucky to have several of those on the program. She also represents a new category of organization, and that is a family business. But while she was quite literally born into the company, you don't have to be in order to have a great career in a family business. And maybe that's why so many talented people are now making private and family businesses their preferred employers. To tell us more about how she crafted the career and life of her dreams and how you can too, please welcome my next guest, Keech Combe Shetty. She is co-CEO of Combe Incorporated. Welcome, Keech.
Thank you, Perry. Thanks for having me.
I'm delighted you could be here. So I have to ask, because Perry's a bit of a unique name for a woman, but Keech is even more unique. So it may not be strategic, but I got to ask, where does the name come from?
Yeah, well, first of all, it is my real name. I get asked that a lot, or if it's a nickname. Yeah, but it is a family name. It's my great-grandmother's maiden name, and it's Old English, and it means a lump of fat or a tub of animal lard. So I'm hoping to live up to that someday, and I think that's why I have such an affinity towards bacon. But it's definitely, it's almost like a blessing and a curse, though, because everyone remembers my name, but then again, everyone remembers my name. So.
Yep. Oh, that's great. I love that. Okay. Now I know how you really started and how you got your name. But let's talk a little bit about your career start. So when you were growing up, obviously your father was the CEO before you. Your grandfather, I believe, founded the company. Did you always want to be the CEO of the family business, or did you have other dreams as a kid? And how did you prepare? If you knew this is what you wanted to do, how did you prepare? If you wanted to do something else, what was it?
Yeah. So growing up, my father actually, he became CEO when I was probably in college, maybe late high school or college. So he had several roles leading up to that, both in the U.S. and internationally. So we lived abroad for the first 2 years of my life as he built up the business there. And then moving back, he was always into the business and traveling quite a bit, and it's always been part of our company. Part of our family. I can't remember one family vacation we went on that wasn't associated with the business. So it's something that's always been around me. I wouldn't say I always wanted to be in the family business. I think I first wanted to be a scientist, although I didn't know what that meant when I was little, but I thought it had something to do with chemistry. At one point I wanted to be a lawyer, but I think really in high school it started to, the seed started to germinate when our dean of discipline at my high school, who was also my math teacher, and neighbors with my grandparents, I guess I came to one of her classes a little bit late one day, and she told me, Keech, you can't keep pulling this if you're going to be running a company someday. And I was like, what company am I going to be running? and she was like, your family's company, of course. And I was like, yeah, I guess that could be for me. So that was really the planting of the seed, was our dean of discipline trying to keep me in line. And as I grew up and went through high school and college, and started thinking about jobs after college, we have a unwritten rule in our family that you have to have prior relevant work experience for several years and an MBA as a family member before you can join the family. So when I was thinking about my first job out of college, I was thinking, okay, well, what path could I take that could help me figure out whether this is an industry and something that I would want to do for the rest of my life, essentially. So I started out for some reason in at an insurance brokerage firm called Aon and Financial Services Group, but was only there for about a year and quickly realized that I think I was made to work with things that people can relate to, that people can touch and see and feel. So I started interviewing, moved back to New York from Chicago, and ended up at Estee Lauder. And actually, the way I ended up there was the former vice chairman of Estee Lauder was a Northwestern alum, and I sent her a letter, a physical letter, believe it or not, saying, I'm a recent grad. I'm really interested in learning about the company that you run. Could you spare a couple minutes for me to come in and chat? And by some miracle, she said yes. And I came in and I was allotted 15 minutes, and we ended up speaking for about an hour and a half. I've never studied so hard for anything in my life. I was reading all their financial reports and every kind of interview that she had given before coming in. And after the hour and a half, she said, well, which one of my brands do you want to work on? Oh. And I was like, well, I had an idea. At the time, they had launched a brand called Jane I believe it was in Kohl's, and they were looking at launching it in Walmart. It was kind of their first launch into mass. So I was interested in that new venture for them, and then I was also interested in their solid base of Clinique. And she said to me, Jane Lauder is actually in the process of building a team, a new international team for Clinique, and with your international background, maybe this is someone you'd want to meet. So I got to meet with Jane, and she ended up hiring me. I worked started out in international marketing. 6 months later, it turned into global marketing, and worked there for several years under her, and learned so much from her. She was such a role model and an idol for me, and I haven't ever really had the opportunity since then to let her know about that in person. But seeing as a family member and knowing the power that yields and how she managed that on a daily basis, and yet was still so effective and so brilliant, so hardworking, that I really took a lot of the lessons from that to heart. So from there, went back to Northwestern, went to Kellogg for business school, and had fabulous 2 years. But as soon as I stepped foot on campus for business school, I knew that my next step was going to be Comb, and everything I had to do in the next 2 years was prepare myself for that role. So every class I took, everything I read everything was geared towards Comb, which was a great focus to have in business school. So coming out of business school, that's when my dad and I had a lunch, and he was telling me about an opportunity for me to help out with something, given my background in the UK market. And I remember telling him, just to play with him a little bit, because I figured this was the last time I was going to be able to do this. After he gave me the whole pitch, I said, "That sounds great, Dad, but I think L'Oreal gave me an offer, and I think I might take it." And his face completely dropped. I was like, "Just kidding! I can't do that to you."
I love it.
So then I started out in the UK office in marketing, but also did some business development work as well there, and launched a new product for us there that we actually ended up selling a couple of years later. And while I was in the UK, everyone's talking about Asia and how do you successfully enter Asia. And so I was looking into India for the company. I did a project around India and looking at the market opportunity there. So we ended up moving to Bombay for 6 months, and I set up the kind of like the skeletal structure there, with the distributors, legal structure, all the market research, and the distribution network, et cetera. And then came back to the UK for another couple months, and then back to White Plains. And I guess the rest is history. So it's something that's always kind of been in the back of my mind, but it's something I always felt like I had to build towards, and I had to prove myself and have my own professional identity before going into it.
It's actually, thank you for sharing that. It's actually brilliant and explains why you are now successfully in the third generation. Because I know family businesses, this is usually the really tricky part. The founder works, and then the next one works, but the third generation, I've seen in a lot of literature, is where you begin to struggle. But what's great is that the expectations that your family set up in terms of working somewhere else and getting a real relevant education, at a good business school in your case, it just really makes a lot of sense. Because as you say, you don't then come in, not only for yourself, but I'm imagining all of the people working in the business, right, who are also very talented individuals, but might not have the same last name as you, are looking at you and thinking, does she really deserve it? And that's like a whole different level of scrutiny. I mean, all women are scrutinized as we rise to the top, but that's a very different level of scrutiny. And I think that how did you handle it? It sounds like what you did is exactly what you said, which is you got a background, you really studied, you proved yourself, and then you came in. So by the time you even arrived, people were thinking, yeah, this person has the goods. This is not just the family passing it on to somebody who happens to have the same blood. Would you say that's true, or have you still really had to work through the scrutiny of being comb in a comb business?
Yeah, I think probably the first couple of years, especially coming in, I definitely still had to, be first one in, last one out, but I didn't have any problems with doing that. But I think after a couple of years and people saw what I could do, what I was about, and I also think the fact that I felt secure in my ability and my professional background, that I didn't feel like I had to prove myself just to prove myself. I was just there. I was going to do the work. It was going to be done, and we're going to try our hardest, do our best. But if I made a mistake, I'll own up to it. I'll be the first one to own up to it. If I say something dumb, hopefully someone can find some nugget in there and build off of it. But I think it's having some humility around my position in the company. But I think in order to do that, I think it had to come with the fact that I felt secure in my ability and my background. And I think it's not a problem now. I think some people from the outside looking in sometimes are, especially, and I think specifically your question around being a woman in this position, some people kind of wonder, well, why do I do it? I have 2 kids at home, and I always think that's such a funny question, because you would never ask a man in a family with that question.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm like, show me a man who would pass up this opportunity. No one should pass up this opportunity. I have the opportunity to build something, and I'm really excited about building something meaningful and lasting. And I have a phenomenal team, so why would I pass this up? But I think the proof is in the pudding.
Yep. Oh, and I agree. You got to deliver. It's that simple. So we talked a little bit about how you got started. I hesitate to say you're, mid-career, because you're not even 40, but you are married, you have 2 kids, and you're the co-CEO. And P.S., this one is just a killer for me. You're the co-CEO with your husband, as I understand.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is just fascinating to me. And so I always ask women who do have families and caregiving responsibilities, how have they juggled it? What kind of compromises have they had to make, et cetera? But in your case, even more so, since your co-CEO is your spouse. So how does this whole thing actually work?
Yeah. It's a secret sauce. We bottle it, and you can buy it on Amazon. No, just kidding. I
want some. I'll take a case. Thank you very much.
No, I think, well, first of all, if you had told me that I was going to marry someone that I was going to be working with at Comb, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, whatever, I would have told you you're crazy. That's never going to happen. I never thought I was ever going to work with my spouse at Comb. I always thought I was going to work at Comb, but I never thought my spouse was going to work at Comb. Mm-hmm. But the way that it kind of came about was very serendipitously and actually a pretty elegant and natural way, if that could actually happen. But my husband, who I met at Kellogg, so when we met at Kellogg, the environment that we met in we're constantly put on cases together. So it's always kind of problem solving and working together in a business sense. Granted, it was school, but it's always in a business sense. So that was the basis of our initial friendship and relationship. And then he has completely complementary skill sets to mine, so I have the more marketing, creative, media background, and his is more, he was an investment banker and a consultant and into the operational side of things, really. So when we were in London, he was working for Lehman Brothers in M&A in media and telco, and then same in India. And actually, when we were living in India, is when Lehman went under. So but P.S. Craziest 6 months of my life. We're living in India, planning a wedding in Vermont. We weren't married yet. We're planning our wedding in Vermont. Lehman goes under. We fly back 2 weeks after Lehman goes under. And Akshay was overseeing a group in India that, in terms of the legal entity and structure of the company, it's kind of fallen through the cracks with the acquisition of Nomura. So we're coming back planning on trying to pitch. I was helping them write books to try to pitch this business before our wedding, to find someone to buy this business, but actually Nomura ended up buying it in the end, which was very lucky, so we were able to enjoy our wedding. And then we come back, and then there were terrorist attacks in Bombay. 2 weeks after that, we got married again in India. So it was crazy, absolutely crazy. But great bonding and learning experience.
Exactly. Very tight by the end of this. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. If we can make it through this, we can make it through anything. So anyway, we moved back to London because he was part of the Nomura acquisition in London. So he was a UK employee. And he stayed there for a couple of months, and he just it wasn't going the direction that he was hoping it would go in. So he decided to leave Lehman. And at that time, we were looking to divest a couple brands. Actually, we were looking at basically strategic opportunities, and ended up divesting a couple brands. It started out with, hey, we need to hire a couple lawyers and banks. Do you think you could help us vet them? Because this is what you do.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it started out with that, and it turned into, can you write our management presentation deck, and can you help us through this management presentation? So we really just slowly swallowed him, and he learned the absolute ins and outs of the entire company through this process, obviously. And when we came out of it, we sold a couple brands that really fit much better in other companies' portfolios than ours, and we were really able to focus on the brands that we felt like had much global opportunities and a lot of product development opportunity. And at that point, my dad said, listen, I'm actually looking to retire, and we need to start talking about succession planning. My dad's right-hand man, who had worked with him for 40 plus years, said the same thing. And then he said, "Do you think Akshay might be interested in my position?" And he was our COO. And I was like, "Gosh, I don't know if that's going to work." So we talked about it Akshay and I talked about it for a long, long time. And finally, we're like, let's give it a go. And the way that I think our secret sauce, was we commuted from Chelsea in New York to White Plains every day, so 45-minute commute, and would essentially upload in the car on the way out, download on the way back. And for the most part, that buffer kind of enabled us to kind of separate work and home. I'm not going to say perfectly, because we're pretty integrated into it on a daily basis, but I think it also helped us realize that there's no point in us overlapping. I respect his judgment and opinions and thoughts in the areas that he has expertise in, and he respects mine in the areas that I have expertise in. And our roles have definitely evolved over the years too, because we've transitioned to, we've hired an amazing senior management team the past few years, and have some incredibly high caliber, talented executives working with us. So now that they're at the helm, Akshay and I are really focused more on the longer term strategy, essentially portfolio allocation, and the soft points too that I think are unique to a family business that we're able to provide to our employees, our customers, our consumers. So it works in a way.
Well, it clearly it does. I mean, I think it's brilliant. It sounded to me that, obviously there was some great negotiation. I mean, this is one of the things we always talk about in terms of women have to ask for what they want, and everybody needs to be a great negotiator. And that doesn't mean, savvy and skill, all that. It just means that you guys had very honest and transparent conversations about what you each wanted, what you each were concerned about. And I think the other thing is, it was brilliant that you have complementary skills so that you really can run different things. And it probably also makes it, in terms of having a safety net and a place where, because one of the things that I was also going to ask about is, for women, particularly at the top, it is usually very lonely. There aren't many other women. And the question is, I actually was thinking about within a family business, particularly if there's any stigma about being from the family, like where do you go to actually have that support? So obviously your husband is one, and your co-CEO is one of the biggest supporters you have. But can you speak to the other ways you've created a support system for yourself? And so when you do have these moments of doubt, where do you go?
Yeah. First of all, we have outside independent board members. So from a professional standpoint, they're a great resource to me. We have one gentleman who ran Unilever the Americas, so he ran about 60% of Unilever. He's fantastic and a great sounding board, and I always seek out his counsel, and kick holes in this. Where am I going wrong, or what have I not thought of? Essentially, because I'd rather rehearse within the safety of our company before anything gets out into the public. So tell me what's wrong with this. And we have another one, Cesar Mello, who runs all of chocolates for Mondelez. So those two guys are great resources for Akshay and myself from a professional standpoint, as well as our senior management team. We have a very tight team, and we've been very deliberate in working hard at building that tightness. And we like to say we're working on going from a great and amazing team to an elite team, which I think we're well on our way. But they're tremendous amount of support. I don't have to be everywhere all the time. They've got it. In fact, it's probably better that I'm not there most of the time. But they're the ones who are really steering the ship on a day-to-day basis, and they're phenomenal to work with. But I think also from a personal side too, I have a very I say small, but they're probably about 12 of us. Very tight group of women who I've known since at least high school, most probably before that, and who are all incredibly successful in their own rights, in their own fields. And who, it's funny now that we're in certain positions in our professional careers, we're actually starting to come across each other on the professional side of things.
I was just thinking that, yep.
More often, yeah. So especially from a media standpoint, I have a few friends who are very senior in the media world, and we keep coming across each other, and everyone's like, God, you know her very well. I'm like, yeah, I met her. I grew up with her. I kind of keep it to probably a small group of friends who know everything about us, and who will be completely straightforward and not let any ego get too big at any points. That's safely in check, thanks to them. But they're a lot of fun, and my kids think that they're friends too. We're around them so much. So I think we just have a very tight, supportive, very smart, very driven group of friends too that are great to have in our lives.
That sounds great. Yeah, and again, I can just tell from your voice it's really working. So let me ask you. So
yeah. Well, actually, let me add one thing though, because I always, whenever I read or hear these interviews with a lot of senior women who it seems like they're doing everything incredibly well, it's never the case. No one is doing everything perfectly. And I think for me, especially juggling the family and the business side of things, I had to get comfortable with the fact that I wanted, in order for me to enjoy some moments with my kids and my husband and my friends, I was going to have to let go of a lot of things that I normally would want to do and frankly outsource them. And the reason why I work so hard is so that I can outsource them now. And it hasn't been like everything overnight, but like there are the small things. Like we have like I love cooking, but I have zero time to be able to cook the way I want to cook for my kids during the week. So that's something that I found a great service for, where they actually, you work with someone who comes into your home to cook for you, and it's all prepared for during the week. Mm-hmm. And they do the grocery shopping, and it doesn't cost that much more than the actual grocery shopping during the week.
Oh,
so if anyone wants to hear about that
service. Yes,
I will give you the it's in New York, but I don't know if they have them in other cities. They have to, but it's a phenomenal service. And I actually have all my friends they cook for our family and now our friends as well. So everyone just kind of picks up their Tupperware at our place now during the week. So we're kind of consolidating and working together. But it's these things. So I would love to cook, but if I'm cooking, I'm not spending time with my kids, and I'd rather spend time with my kids while they're awake before they go to bed. So unfortunately it's getting comfortable with outsourcing some things.
I'm so glad you raised that, because indeed there is no woman who does it all perfectly and at the same time, right? It just doesn't happen. You cannot be completely fit, completely, the perfect mother, the perfect spouse, the, gorgeous person, like it doesn't all happen at one time. It's just not possible. And so you need to, one of the most important things that all of my interviewees have talked about is you have to understand how you have to be okay with getting the help you need at work and at home.
Yeah.
I think that's very important, because the guilt, and you just have to put away the guilt and say, this is what it is.
Exactly.
Yep.
This is what it is. Thank you notes are like the bane of my existence. So I always tell people, don't get me anything, mainly because I don't want to write thank you notes. But I did find a nice little trick is to write them on paperless post, because half the battle of thank you notes is figuring out people's addresses and then finding a stamp. I don't even know where you buy a stamp these days anymore. Mm-hmm. So I just do it on paperless post, and it's done.
It's done. I like it. Exactly. Well, and that's, I am the same way. And I make my daughter write thank you notes. And it's just, I hound her and she's like, Mom, it doesn't matter. I said, honey, it matters. If you want to have a gift, then you are going to write a thank you note. And if you want me to tell all the kids that they're not going to come with gifts, that's fine. I have no problem. But that's the quid pro quo. Yeah. That's the way it is. And I'm with you. It's like she does all the letters and then she says, can you mail them for me, Mom? And I'm like, she's 12. And I'm like, thanks. That's another 2
weeks later.
Exactly. So I email. I'm the big email person. Okay, so let me just ask. So we talked about a lot of things that actually have gone well. You've worked hard. You've done very well. You're only just beginning. As you said, you've got decades ahead of you. But was there at one point, most successful women have struggled at some point. They had a bad break, a big failure, on the receiving end of some unacceptable behavior. Did you ever experience anything like that? Would you be willing to share one of your most difficult or outrageous things that happened, and how did you handle it?
Oh, man. Yes. It wasn't a moment. I would say it was a period of time, really. But, as a family business, we've only really had two big inflection points, and one is transferring from my grandfather to my father, and then from my father to me. And frankly, I think this isn't just relevant for family businesses, because I think that I've talked to a lot of CEOs of big companies around the world, and I think that this is something that's happening really across the globe with business, because it's the fundamentals and the way you do business the past 3 to 5 years have just shifted so much that you really need to think about, okay, what is the structure and what does my company look like now? Mm-hmm. And is that what it needs to be for today and the future, for the next 67 years? Or how do we make sure we keep evolving to that? So the generational transition from my father to me isn't just my father to me. It's really looking at, we're going from TV to digital. It's looking at the matrix of how our senior managers interact, and what countries, where are we online, where are we brick and mortar, where are we combination. So, and how do you build the workforce that's appropriate for that? And we're seeing this any size company, any industry, if a company is not going through this or has not gone through this in recent years, then frankly I don't know how much they're going to be positioned to compete for the future. So, but going through that process is incredibly difficult and painful. And I think, especially this is where I think Family Business might be unique, is that we have such longevity, which is something we celebrate and we absolutely love. When I first started, I was going to retirement dinners for people who had been at the company for 45 years plus.
Wow.
It's been not uncommon for us to celebrate 25, 30, 35 year anniversaries with our company. And I think that's what makes that's part of our competitive advantage, is having that history and that longevity. But the reality is sometimes we have to transition things a bit faster than we normally like. So going through that process and building that structure was definitely a difficult moment for us, because it's looking at something that has worked, and it's not like it was broken, but it needed to evolve to compete for the future. So
you didn't have the burning platform, and yet you still had to essentially create a burning platform in order to drive the amount of change and the speed of change that you saw necessary.
Exactly.
Very interesting. So I'm conscious of your time, so I'm going to skip ahead and probably go to kind of the last question, and that is that. What would be the single most important thing you would tell other women who are seeking to build the careers and lives of their dreams, particularly in a family or a private company, and if they're not actually born into the company? Would it be different than a public company? So what kind of advice would you give to people?
I don't know if this is necessarily to women, but maybe it's more relevant to women, is dream big and aim high, because people who set big goals end up achieving much more than when you just set a goal that just might be just outside, a little bit of a stretch, but really set a big goal. I would love to see more women in C-suite positions. I would love to see a lot more women on boards. I'd love to see a lot more women in government leadership. And I think sometimes, you're juggling between the realities of a home life and a family life and ambition, and you put it off and you put it off and you put it off, and sometimes there's never a good time to go after what you really want. So you'll figure it out along the way. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to be messy, but I promise you, if you want to go after it and you're dedicated to it, dream big and start going after it today. Don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait for next year, and you'll figure it out.
I love it. Last question, because I honestly don't know the answer. Is there any difference in recruitment for a family business or a private business versus a public company? Meaning, if somebody listening to this program goes, gosh, I would really like to work with this company, how would they go about that? How do they get your attention? How do they go about? Do you use all the same resources that everybody else does in terms of headhunters and online, applications, or is it different?
Yeah. Well, the headhunting and application, we use the same stuff. We have a phenomenal head of HR who actually came from the headhunting world, and Pepsi before that, and she also is a Kellogg grad, actually, originally from Venezuela. But the whole application process is pretty much the same for us. I think once you make it through that step, for us, the way we look at it, we don't look at who you are, where you came from. We want brains. A body is just the vehicle for your brain to get around. So we want ambitious people who, from a smaller business perspective, who are willing to get scrappy, who are willing to wear multiple hats, and who are passionate about what they do and want to build something. I think actually statistically, I've seen the slides on this, but all the innovation that's coming, that people are seeing in the marketplace these days are coming from mid-market companies. So it's not the large companies that are developing the innovation. You know, they have phenomenal R&D departments, but their R&D departments, for the most part, are usually looking at the upstream moonshots. But the innovation that you see on a daily basis, that's coming from mid-market companies. And the way that is happening is because you have to be smarter, faster, scrappier than your large competitors because you just don't have the resources and the depth of a bench that they do. So getting in the front door is probably exactly the same. Going through the process, I think it might be, I think if you look at our Glassdoor reviews, I think we put people through the ringer, but we want to make sure that they know what they're getting into because if they're not happy, we're not going to be happy, and we don't want them to be unhappy with what we offer. So we're pretty transparent with what we offer. In terms of a competitive package, it's not exactly the same. You know, we don't have
shares,
public shares essentially,
Yep.
but we have other incentive structures that are very competitive in the marketplace. So we get some pretty top talent.
Excellent. Yeah, I imagine, as I said in the beginning, I mean, the truth is, given, frankly, I mean, I come from Unilever, Kraft, then Mondelez, whatever, so it's like when you look at how much change has been going on in those companies and the cost cutting and everything else, I think that's just the whole CPG world, the big players. A lot of people are leaving them. As much as I had a phenomenal experience at both of those companies, I loved it, but they're leaving because they really are looking for a very different situation and where they can have more impact, more control, where they can move faster with less bureaucracy. And so it sounds to me like it's not surprising that a lot of people would be choosing companies like yours.
Right.
So excellent.
Right. Well, if you want a seat at the table, this is the kind of company you come work at, but you better be ready for the responsibility of having a seat at the table.
What a great place to end. Because that's what every woman listening to this, I'm hoping they want a seat at the table. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say I thought of my dinner.
Please. So who would you love to have a power lunch, dinner, cocktail with?
Okay. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I think she's fantastic, and she has my absolute favorite quote, which is that women will never truly be emancipated until men take equal responsibility for raising the next generation.
Great.
And I also had Elizabeth I, just to pick her brain. I mean, it must have been a phenomenal time.
Oh, absolutely. Who could not respect her? Wow.
Right. Julia Louis-Dreyfus, because she is hilarious and brilliant and also a Northwestern alum. And if you haven't seen Veep, I wish I was that smart to spew that kind of filth so quickly. It's amazing. And I have good comic relief. And I'd have to say Hillary. I'd love to see. I'd love to ask her what the next move is going to be.
Yep. Very interesting. Well, thank you. I love that. And if you happen to get these people together, Elizabeth I, probably a real stretch, but
a little difficult. Yeah, a little difficult.
Someday technology will figure it out. Genetics, I don't know.
Right.
But at any rate, I'd love to be there. But Keach, thank you so much. It was wonderful getting to talk to you. And thank you on behalf of listeners for sharing your insights and inspiration.
Great. Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
You've been listening to Pivot Points, a series designed to help ambitious women have the careers and lives of their dreams. To hear more interviews, go to www.yourcareeryourterms.com. And be sure to tell us what you think. If there are topics you'd like covered or people you'd like